Hi, it's Sharon from SharonTheReader.com. I would like to share something that happened yesterday with you. And it was the conversation that I was privileged enough to have with the late Sam Cooke. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know a lot about Sam Cooke. I got to hear his music through a friend. And then after that, I bought a few of his CDs, not many. And this man had the most amazing voice. And I mean, he was smooth like chocolate. His voice was amazing. His music was amazing. His songwriting was amazing. So, I'm going to fill you in on things that I didn't know about Sam Cooke. I did know that he was a black man. He was born in Mississippi. He moved to Chicago. And by the late 50s, the early 60s, that's when he really came to prominence. For those who don't know anything about him, as I didn't know anything about him, I'm going to mention a few of his songs and see does it ring a bell with you. First of all, the one I love best was You Sent Me. I think it's a beautiful song. Another Saturday Night, which is a very upbeat sort of dancey song. Twisting the Night Away, and I think everybody knows that one. Cupid, which I think everybody knows that song. He said his favourite song was Teenage Sonata. A nice song, but not my favourite. But then I'm not singing it, and you wouldn't want me to. So, really, there's some of his music that maybe will ring a bell with you. I knew that he had really kind of reached the peak. I also knew that he had a child that had drowned in a swimming pool. And I knew that he was shot. Beyond that, I didn't know anything about Sam Cooke, except that I really admired his music. And I really admired his voice. When he was speaking to me, he was exceptionally honest. And I mean exceptionally honest. He was married and he had 3 children. He did say that the youngest of the children, which was his son, drowned. And I got the impression from what he was saying that this was a baby, maybe 2 or 3 years of age. And it drowned in the swimming pool. I don't think him and his wife were in love before that, but they had found a way of making their marriage kind of work okay for the both of them in their own way. After the death of the child, and as he was talking to me, you really could feel, even in the afterlife, that when he looked back on his life in this world, that there was a spark that was gone. Because this was a guy who really had a spark. He had an ambition, he had a spark, and he could just see a potential just opening up in front of him. And suddenly, when he started talking about the baby's death, it was totally different. It was just the spark had gone. That's all I can tell you. So, he was very open and he was very honest about a lot of things. First thing I'm going to tell you is he did decide when he'd had maybe his second, third hit, that he wanted more than just working for someone and getting the pittance that a lot of artists do. And he decided that he would start up his own company type of thing. He would own the rights to his own music, which at that point no one had done. His opinion on that was, as a black man, he watched other people being ripped off. And he decided that it was not going to happen to him. And while it was not going to happen to him, that other people also, black artists, white artists, could also come to the same company, do the same as he was doing, and own the rights to their own music, which really hadn't happened up until then. So this was a very forward-thinking person. He was also very aware politically of where the black population stood. So he had 2 angles. He had the angle of business head. he also had the angle of being, and did become much more so, politically aware of the black situation. So with those two things, this is how he intended to forward his life. And he made it very clear to me that this was his aim and that this was what he intended to achieve. So, let's just go back to his personal life. He was a married man with 3 children. And then after the death of the youngest child, he was still married with 2 children. The marriage, he said, at that point, it just totally broke down. But they didn't separate. They just lived very different lives. I think he said, or I think he thought, that he could continue being married to this woman and be a husband, but more of a provider than a loving husband, because there really was no love between the both of them. They didn't hate each other, but that love that may have been there, and he didn't say it was, but I'm just taking that possibly it may have been there, had completely dissolved, and so both of them were having affairs outside of their marriage. And he was very honest about the fact that both of them knew that they were both having affairs, and they just overlooked it. Their children became important. And so for that reason, I think he would have stayed with his wife. However, on the business front, there were 2 people that he had linked up with in management. And he stated very openly and very clearly that he trusted both these people, although he said he had been warned about one of them. And he said it was unusual for him not to listen to people talking. But that at this particular point, he really ignored the advice he was being given, and he thought that this was the way forward. He said he was doing a show one night, and it would have been out of state, and both managers came unexpectedly, and they said, we want you to sign this form, and we want to date it. And he said it was unusual. There was no rush for it. They could have waited till he came back, and he could have signed the form there and then. But they kind of put it off that, well, they were coming up for the evening, and they were there to see the show and things like that, and they presented the paper right in front of him. And so he signed the paper and thought nothing of it. What actually transpired, he said, was that when he started to look into what he had signed, it was not what he was told he was signing. So there was an agenda going on with the 2 managers. And it became quite clear to him what this agenda was. And the problem with that was that he literally was signing away his entire rights, the very thing that he was fighting for, which was the ownership of his music and the ability to actually have other artists come in and achieve the same thing as he was having. The ability to own your own music, your musical rights and things like that, so that as opposed to being creamed off at the top by your manager, you were actually at the top. Your manager worked for you. They were paid. So the whole thing, when he looked at it, actually was not what he had signed at all. It was not what the agreement was supposed to be at all. So he did confront them about it. And they said, there was a mistake and it was going to be sorted out and things like that there. However, other things took precedence. The things that took precedence happened on an evening when he was due to have dinner with friends. And he met those friends. And they did have dinner. And then they went on somewhere else, and he said he would meet up with them. It was another club that they were going to. And while he was still in the same place where they were having dinner, there's people having drinks at the bar, and things like that, there was one particular girl who was, he said he couldn't actually work her out. She was kind of coming on to him, but backing away at the same time. And he was pretty intrigued with this. It was a challenge to him. It was sort of, yeah, I want to know, are you interested? I want to know if you plan me. So he did come on to her, and she did appear quite interested. And then she mentioned, a hotel that was not too far from the club that they were in, and they should perhaps go back there. Well, at that point, he was aware that this girl was going to have a sexual encounter with him, and that was exactly what he wanted that evening. And so they left, and she suggested a particular hotel. They drove there, and he did say he was pretty tipsy. Not drunk, but pretty tipsy. Certainly over the legal limit of driving today. But they got to the hotel, and he said he was a man who he liked nice clothes. He liked good suits. And he said he really, really was exceptionally hygienic, which I thought was kind of funny. But, he was just giving me part of his character. And it was interesting. It's interesting to hear a person's character and what their personality is really like. So he said that basically he left her outside, in the bedroom, and he went into the bathroom for a wash. And he said possibly after the act of sex, he would have gone in and had a wash again, because that's the type of person he was. And then, because he would have been tired, and he knew he was tired that evening, that he would have probably slept there the evening and got up the next morning, and the both of them would have went their own way. When he came out, the only part of his clothing that was there was his shoes and his jacket. His pants were taken. They were not there. And his thing was, I don't think, and he did say this, he didn't think she was a prostitute. But at that point, the bells did ring that this was a prostitute he had been with, although nothing at that point had happened. So he said these are things that people do when they're drunk. He says, you do the most stupid things when you're drunk. And probably he's quite right. I think we've all looked back in our past and went, what the hell was I thinking when I done that? Although, having said that, I don't think any of us went maybe just as far as this night. But he was angry, and he wanted his clothes, and he wanted to know why he was being messed around. He hadn't done anything in this girl. He hadn't even slept with her at this point. He went down to the desk, and there was no one on the desk in the hotel. He knocked the door of the manager's office. The manager was a woman. And she didn't answer, so he knocked again. And then she did answer the door. The story in court went, she answered the door. He was very threatening towards her, exceptionally abusive, pushing her around, and she simply shot him for her own protection. He actually showed me what actually took place. And what took place was, against the wall in the corner, there was a shotgun. Now, it seems he wasn't shot with a shotgun. He was shot with a pistol or a revolver, whatever you want to call that. But at the end of the day, why had this woman got a pistol and also a shotgun? Because the shotgun was never mentioned in the court hearing, he said. But then, as he said, a lot wasn't mentioned in the court hearing. She shot him 3 times. She did get him in the heart. And he didn't die instantly. It was, I wouldn't say a slow death, but it wasn't instant. He then said that he was really, it wasn't making sense to him. And his attitude was, why did you shoot me? And I think he said something like, woman, you shot me. He really was quite startled by this, not what he was expecting at all. He said the one thing that hurt most was that he was actually shot by one of his own people, a black woman. What he wanted to know was, How long had the girl been gone when he was in the bathroom getting washed? Or what had the woman seen her leave? In actual fact, that's what he wanted to know, but what he realised after his death when he looked back and he saw the thing, the prostitute went into the woman's office, so she went into the manager's office, letting the manageress know that yes, she had the clothes, she was getting dressed in her own clothes, took his clothes, left. The manageress knew exactly what to do. Bear in mind, she was still in the office when the shooting took place. Then she left. Then the manageress contacted the police. The circumstances of this was pretty amazing when he revealed it to me, because the reason for it was there was 2 or 3 agendas going on, but all at the one time. One was the 2 guys that he had entered a business agreement with had messed up, in his opinion, and were undercutting him. So that meant that he would not receive any of the royalties of his music, would not have the rights over the music that he made, and any engagements that he had done or would be doing in the future. Basically, it meant that anything he had worked towards was null and void. They were the people who were going to make the money. He was going to make nothing, since he was asking the wrong questions, which really were the right questions. What was going on? Why was this signature on this piece of paper selling him out? This is what he had signed. The other agenda was he became completely politicized. He was a friend of Muhammad Ali. He was a friend of Malcolm X. Those people were very prominent at the time, and they were very into the rights of the black population. So, from Sam's point of view, he was learning an awful lot, and he was becoming quite prominent himself, although quietly so. But that's kind of dangerous, and it would have certainly been very dangerous in the 60s. So there was another agenda, which was to get rid of him. We don't want people rising up. We don't want black people having power. And that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted power over the music business. That was basically what the problem was. Reason number 2 for getting rid of Sam Cooke. So it would have been valuable to not only black artists, because it wouldn't have been only black artists that he was interested in. It may have been his thing at the time that they were not getting anywhere. They were not making the money they should have done. But he was not a person who, although being aware of the black community and the feeling that black people were not getting their rights met, he was not down on white people. So his thing was equality. Equality, not superiority. So he also said that if you look even today, artists are still being ripped off in the same way. And he mentioned Michael Jackson, and he mentioned Tupac. He mentioned another few, but I'm just going to stick with those, because at the end of the day, Michael Jackson, I liked his music. It was good dance music. It's hard to say what I felt about the sex charges that went up against Jackson, but according to Sam Cooke, Michael Jackson was not into pedophilia. He was very clear on that. He said that Michael Jackson, due to his upbringing, was not really what you would call a man who would have been involved in sex in that way. It was just not his thing. So there was like a stunted growth with Jackson, in his opinion, although he did admire his music. The other person was Tupac, and I can't say anything about Tupac because I think that's hip hop and it's not something I'm into. But he said the same thing happened with Tupac. So he still today was talking about artists that we're living with today being in danger. And I don't think he was just simply saying black people, but his emphasis, probably because he was a black person himself, was first and foremost in his mind. He mentioned the fact that he was in love with a woman called Linda, and that seemed to have been going on for 3, maybe 5 years, this particular girl. She was not sort of a pick-up for the night. This was a person he genuinely was in love with. And he was very strange about the way because he said to me, spell her name Linda. So, Linda. So if Linda, or if anyone knows who Linda was, she was a woman who he was in love with and was having an affair with for, I would say, it seemed like between 3 to 5 years. That was the woman he really was in love with. He was exceptionally honest, I have to say, about so many things in his life. Because at one stage he said that he felt that he was arrogant, that he was an arrogant man. And that was one of the things that I really didn't find at all. If anything, I would have said he was the most gentle, self-aware person that I have ever met or spoken to. Arrogance. The only thing that I would say where he may have felt this was, he said on the death of his child, he blamed his wife. He said he blamed her like a red hot poker. He just totally blamed her. Why was she not looking after their child? The pool was outside. What was a child of that age doing alone outside at a pool where, unfortunately, it drowned? And he could not forgive her for that. He then said a very interesting thing, and this is something I think wasn't in his mind while he was blaming his wife, but something that certainly he became aware of when he crossed over. He was met by that child when he crossed over. And the thing he said was, while he really was so angry with his wife for not looking after the child, he said he forgot one thing. He was the one who wanted the pool, not her. She did not want the pool, but he was the one who wanted the pool. That was one thing he blamed himself for. And basically, I think the arrogance, and this is what he was kind of relaying to me, was he wanted the pool because he wanted to be the equal of any white man at the peak of his profession who could provide a home with a pool for his family. So I can see where he was coming from, but I personally did not find him arrogant, and I didn't think that that was an arrogant thing to do. After all, the man was working hard. He was earning his money. He was trying to open doors for himself and for other people, which I think is the way it should be. I totally agree with that. I also believe, as he did, what is the difference between a white person and a black person, a Chinese person, a European person? What is the difference? Are we really that uncultured today? Would we ever have been, or could we ever have been, that uncultured to think that you are superior to another race, another religion, another anything? What can you possibly be thinking in your head, or where do these thoughts come from? And this is me, and maybe this is my little bit of anger coming out, because I can't accept it. And I'll never accept it, and I don't want to accept it. And when you've had the privilege of speaking to a person like Sam Cooke, who had all his ducks in a row, who knew what was the right way to be, what was the right way to go, it makes you feel a very small person if you are not on that page. If you are not on the page of equality, belief, self-belief and looking after other people, then what page are you actually reading? Because it is not in my book. I do not have that page, and I would never want to have it. And that might sound angry, but I hate racism. I cannot stand racism. The other thing I would say is the pleasure of his company was actually beautiful. And you hear people saying, oh, this is a beautiful man, or oh, this is a beautiful woman. And mainly what they're talking about is the physical body. Sam Cooke certainly was a very, very, very good looking man. But the spirit that I spoke to was really beautiful. This was a person who just was goodness. And you can say morally, having affairs, all the rest of it, prostitution. I don't care what anyone thinks. If you had a conversation with this man, you would say the same thing as me. You were in the company of a gentleman. And I mean that in two ways. A gentleman who spoke to me as a person with no barriers. And also a gentleman who was a gentle man. Now, he did say one thing, and he said his biggest pride, and this perhaps is the sad part, his biggest pride, he said, was writing the song, A Change Is Going to Come. And it is a beautiful song. And yet, isn't it so sad to think that a change did come, and we lost a beautiful man with a voice that was absolutely stunning, and a mind that was progressive enough to see how the future should be and could be. I would just say the pleasure was mine, and the privilege was mine, and that's the privilege and the pleasure I'm handing over to you today. Okay, so I hope you didn't think this was a down video, because I don't want to bring people down. There's a lot going on in the world today, and it is a very difficult time for people. People are heartbroken over things that are happening, over the loss of family members, over the deaths. So I hope you're all being exceptionally safe, distancing, that you're washing your hands. Just remember, Sam was exceptionally hygienic. But yeah, it is a time that is concerning. So, if you like my work, and if you want to connect with me, if you want to ask questions, visit my website, that is sharonthereader.com. If you're catching me on YouTube, please subscribe and put your comments in below. I would love to know what more I can do for you. As you know, I do readings. I think that's pretty obvious. But if there's other things that you want to communicate about, and the world is not the way it should be at the moment, then please feel free. Let me know. Not only am I a reader, I'm a human being just like you. So, I'm in the dark here. I don't know what you want. And if you let me know, I'll endeavour to do it for you. So I'm just going to say, please take care. Please stay healthy. God bless. Take very good care of yourselves and each other. Bye.